I give you just a quick introduction. Jeroen has been looking into water in and around the city. And of course, his focus is not only on calculating what's on the sedimation, but what are let's say, overarching water systems and how can we benefit from it on the city scale. So moving from let's say, perhaps a bit more local into a large water systems. With that, I give the floor to you, Jeroen, please.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to share my screen, but because I just came in, I'm still looking where I can find my presentation. It is on my screen, so I think this should, maybe you see yourself now, but if I switch to the right thing, it should come. In the meantime, I can start talking. One moment, slideshow, start, why not? From the beginning. Do you see this? Do you see my slideshow now as well?
Yes.
Yes, okay, thank you very much. Okay, so my name is Jeroen. I'm working at Amsterdam University of Applied Sciences. And in fact, I'm a civil engineer and a water manager. And many years ago, I started I was mainly interested in sewer systems, but then more and more it became interesting because that extreme rainfall events did flood cities. And so I started working on this as well. And it was in 2006. And in fact, it struck me that many municipalities, they mainly designed for only the design storm for amount of rainfall, which was expected once in 2 years. And we didn't look at all at what's happening once in 50 years or once in 100 years. So that was the reason why I started working in this. Many municipalities had to find out what they wanted to do for this. So, and I was able to create a research group at the Amsterdam University of Applied Sciences. And now have 15 persons working for me. It's a whole variety of people, from meteorology to the urban design and of course hydrology. And the title which I've got, I think Sandra made it, or one of you made this. Indeed, it's about water-based solutions to create climate-resilient cities. They also become healthier, resilient, dynamic, I'm not sure, but certainly they should become more attractive. And this was not there yet, so I like to add attractive to this. And I want to show you 3 projects which I've been doing the last years. And they range from small scale to larger scale. Next slide is not coming. Oh, this is okay. So the first thing is about retrofitting of residential areas. And it was mainly focused on extreme rainfall. So we have sometimes a cloudburst of which is expected only like once in 100 years. It might be 60 or 40 or 90 millimeters per hour. And this is a lot for the Netherlands. And then the water will just flood the streets and also flood the houses. Of course, this is unwanted, and partly because of climate change, but also because more and more pavement was, more and more surface in the city was paved. So the problems became bigger and bigger. Municipalities started to look for solutions. So, and in fact, after some research, we thought it's not so difficult at all. And mainly in flat areas. You know, in the Netherlands, we have many parts which are totally flat. And the differences are maybe some dikes and some bridges or some sleeping policemen in the roads, but it's all flat. So if there's a lot of rainfall, and the rainfall might be like 60 millimeters in 1 hour, so something like this, 6 centimeters. So there's no problem at all. But if this water comes from the roofs, it might become 12 millimeters, all the water comes together in the street. And if water from a large area comes together, it might be 25, 50, and then in the end, maybe 1 meter. And then you have problems. So the solution is just to keep it spread out and store it where it's falling. And in fact, this is the solution also for many residential streets. You can simply lower the street level. So you see here, the blue line is the lower street level, in which there is, if there's a lot of rainfall, the water can be stored temporarily in the street. And then after the rainfall, the water will be discharged to the sewer system, or there will be porous pavement and it can infiltrate in the ground, or it can go to a swale. And the other example I have here is a solution with a swale. So you make the water moving towards the swale. And this solution is quite easy. And because of those solutions, we said you can do climate resilient design with the same cost as for the normal design of urban fabric. So, and we showed in many situations where it was possible. What do I need to say? Oh yeah, the one other thing I need to explain. We also assume that only of the amount of rainfall, only 20 millimeters can go into the sewer system or into the drainage system, and the other 40 millimeter at the extreme event will stay in the streets. But normally, this 20 millimeter is expected in 1 hour is expected only once in 2 years. So you hardly ever see rain in this green area. So this is a very simple example, and we made quite some examples of this for all kind of different characteristic urban topologies in the Netherlands. So we had like 10 different examples showing that in those examples you can retrofit your urban area at the same cost. And we call this The Climate is Right Up Your Street. This book, this one is in English, and you can get it at my website. So I hope it will help you. This was focusing on stormwater. Next, we also, because municipalities asked for this, we moved towards urban heat. And the first thing in urban heat was the Real Cool project. This was a project we did together with Sandra Lenz also. She set it up, and it was interesting because municipalities in general and the designers for the municipalities in general think, okay, we add surface water in the city to cool down the city. And we wanted to know how to design this water in the small surface water in the cities in the way that we have the maximum effect. Part of the research was making those designs, making prototypes for designs and showing how you can optimize them. And another part, and this was done by Sandra and her colleagues, and the other part was done by us, another party, and was about EnviMet modeling and really calculating the effect of those surface water. And the disappointing effect was that the simulations showed that local thermal effect of small water bodies can be considered negligible in design practice. So there was hardly any effect of this nice water in the urban area on temperatures, on air temperature and on comfort temperature, like PET. It was like 0.2 till 0.6 degree on air temperature. It was like 0.6 till maximum 1.9 degree on PET. And that's far too little to be really felt by people. So this was quite disappointing. The one good thing about this is that also some people say, and they're right, that surface water can also be warming the urban city because the water is normally cooler, but in the end of the summer, it gets warmer and warmer, and especially at night, it might be warmer than the outside. So the water hinders the cooling down of the city. But this effect was even smaller than the effect during the day. So for the designers, so don't make surface water expecting that it really cools the temperatures. However, it's not so bad as I'm saying now, because there is quite some reason to put water into cities. Cities make water makes cities more attractive, right? And it gives the opportunity to create space for trees, and trees create shadow, and shadow is the most effective way of cooling a city during the day. So, and next to this, you can design it in such a way that you have access to water, and of course, you can also create natural ventilation. There's a place where there are no houses, maybe on the water itself, also no trees, so you have ventilation, and in the end, you make the city more attractive. So this was the second example I wanted to show you. And then the third example, and it's more about heat resilience. And it's not really a water solution, but many of the solutions I present now for heat resilience are about greening the city, about trees. And of course, you need water for trees. So that's why I think it's right to present it here. About heat in the city, the situation was that from 2020 onwards, all Dutch municipalities should retrofit their cities. When there's a project, you should retrofit it in a climate resilient way. And it's about stormwater, it's about drought, it's also about water safety, but also about heat problems. And the thing is, municipalities didn't know at all how to assess urban heat, or didn't know what to choose, and didn't have any guidelines for this. So with about 45 municipalities, we started working on how to assess, how to analyze the urban heat, how to choose, now to find out what measures are most effective, and how to choose what you want in the design. And we came up with with several guidelines. The results have been written down in a Dutch report. I'm sorry we didn't translate it yet. It's about the heat resilient city. So I still have to do this. But to explain it, we came up with the conclusion that there are mainly two temperatures important. We want to have the local air temperature, perceived temperature, so the comfort temperature, we want to have this decreased during the day. And we want to have this because then you can keep the city attractive and accessible during the day. And the other thing is we want to decrease the air temperature over the whole city. So we have two lines of approach, and we made 3 guidelines from those 2 goals. And the first one is distance to cool spaces. We said you need a walking distance to a comfortable, cool space from any apartment in the city, and not more than 300 meters. So people being trapped in their own home because it's very hot and they maybe don't have an airco, they can still go outside and find a nice place outside to have comfort. And the second thing is sufficient walking on the sufficient shade on the walking areas. So during the hottest moment of the day, there should be enough shade on walking areas, like 30 or 40%. And we tested this number 30 or 40% on many photos we made from streets, and we asked the municipalities, what do you think is a correct number? We did not check this based on the effect for people. It's because we think it's not possible really to decide what number of, what threshold of amount of shadow, or even what distance to walk should not be exceeded. So it's very difficult to make a threshold. So we choose thresholds which we have decided together with the municipalities. Okay, and this was the second one. And the third one is the percentage of green spaces in the neighborhood. And we said, okay, we wanted to increase the amount of green space in an area. So we said, we analyzed many municipalities, and we said, for a certain topology of an urban area, we said, okay, the average amount of green in this area is like this. So every municipality should have at least this average value for green in this type of urban area, but maybe you better should increase it towards what's also possible, and that's the average plus a standard deviation. Also, this is not a very strict number. It's a strict number, but it's not really validated on at which level do you have less problems. And this is because it's, to my opinion, impossible to decide on really threshold levels based on risk assessment, based on what kind of people are hindered by the heat. There's no temperature level below, above which at one moment many people will die. It's also about how often it is, how long the heat wave is. So it's so difficult to do this. We especially choose for simple guidelines, which could be implemented by municipalities. And in the Netherlands, there are quite some municipalities who have adopted those guidelines and are using this to redesign their urban space. And we also took care that the way to analyze a design or an urban space on the guidelines is quite simple. And in the Netherlands, we have a map available for the whole of the Netherlands on high local detail, showing the PET values of every location. And in fact, I believe it's more a shadow map, because in the shadow, the PET value is like 10 to 15 degrees lower than in the sun. So you see mainly where's shadow and where's no shadow. But those shadows are possible local spots. And those possible local cool spots, that's what I mean. And those cool spots are what you need. And okay, you have a map to start working on. And I think after this map, you need really a designer or a planner of the municipality to find out if this cool spot is really an attractive cool spot. And so we put some extra questions like, are there benches, trash bin, is the vegetation and water, and is it not a private garden, and other things. So we checked some things, but this was not sufficient yet. So we did more research with more municipalities to find out what are really reasons to come up, what are nice cool spots. So in several municipalities, go a bit quicker here. So the most attractive small places were places with the local park and the playground, a simple green park at the waterfront is also very good, and also various mixing of various functions, because those cool spots are not only meant for hot days, but also, of course, for the rest of the year. And we also had some examples not like this. And based on this, we came with a list of, okay, how can you make a green spot? We have some essential issues. So the shade should be large enough. There should be benches, enough vegetation, diversity between sun and shade, but also some bonus points. And we hope that with those guidelines, the municipalities can design their urban space in a heat resilient way. And we think that the designers themselves, they have sufficient freedom to design it in a way which is really useful. And that the design guidelines are simple, so those rules can be implemented within all the other tasks a designer has. Like the energy transition, change of mobility, maybe new design of the area and other things. So that's in my last sheet. So the conclusion is stormwater, you can create space for storing water above ground. The cooling water, it was not really cooling on temperature, but create space and they can make the city much more attractive. And the heat will make some design guidelines. That's all I have for now. And I'm ready to take some questions from you.
It was a very interesting proposal for, I hope, for not only the cities in Holland, but for everywhere in the world. If you don't mind, I would give the floor to Mariana, who is sitting next to me now, and perhaps we collect the questions after her brief research. So Mariana is also part of the Soloclim water-based solutions research group. And as when Adrian was looking into, let's say, a bit more local solutions, Mariana is looking at the master plan scale. So please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Monica. Thank you for having me. Good afternoon, everyone. So my research is titled The Evaporative City, Guidelines on Bioclimatic Urban Adaptation and Regeneration Using Water. And I'm ESR number 4. So first of all, I just want to like to thank my advisor team at Politecnico di Milano, my main advisor, Professor Valentina Dessi, and my tutor, Professor Eugenio Morello, and also my Arcadis core advisor team, Verali, Marian Luke, and of course the daily advisors, Michelle and Robert, and thanks DAY1 for the funding. So the aim of my research is to generate master planning design, a master planning design support tool that can provide planning and design guidelines for the implementation of water systems in the neighborhood level that aid in alleviating extreme heat. So I hope to come up with what I would call a design-aided decision-making tool. So my main research questions are, so what water cooling toolkits of systems can benefit cities in adapting to extreme heat? And of course, also excess precipitation. Which water cooling solutions most benefit neighborhoods in different climates to respond to the urban heat island effects and extreme heat? And of course, excess precipitation. And where water-based cooling solutions are most needed based on socioeconomic factors, cooling needs, and the need for creating a good quality public space. And our focus is the urban canopy layer, so the space below roofs. My research is structured in 4 parts. So first I started with analysis in the block scale, looking to microclimate simulations of baselines using the EnvMat software. Then I moved to the city scale to map, let's say, hot and cool spots in cities. And the last part focusing on neighborhoods and using research by design and the results from part 1 and 2. Then I'm into produce my guidelines for the water toolkits. So revisiting water cooling principles, this is well known. We are not creating anything new in terms of principles. So first of all, we have high thermal mass of water and evaporative cooling. And then from the literature, we know big water bodies like big lakes and the sea, they are effective as a cooling because of the high thermal mass of water. But small water bodies, the effect is negligible, or even, and they have a warming effect. And evaporative cooling, we know we can have up to a decreasing air temperature to 10 degrees Celsius. And this is not new. We know this from Persian and Egyptian vernacular architecture. For example, here we see the badgir, the wind catcher, using a Sasabil fountain. But when we talk about water cooling for outdoor spaces, we need compatible climate conditions. So this is not, we cannot use it the whole year, like every time, and it needs a specific conditions. So most of the summer, and we need high level of solar radiation, high air temperature, and low relative humidity. Here we see a map showing where evaporative cooling is most applicable in Europe, especially in zone 1, where like where we have hot and dry summers. And in revising the physical properties of these water solutions, from high specific heat of water and then cooling by evaporation, from high specific heat of water, we know what is happening. We're not focusing on that, but looking at the second part on B, cooling by evaporation through the latent heat of water, we have cooling the water. So for that, we have the fountains, and cooling the air using micronization and mist splashes and wet pavements. Also, my research from these water elements, we started to compile a catalog of application of these solutions from projects in Europe. And sometimes it's one of these water solutions, sometimes the combination of them in both like open spaces or squares or neighborhoods. And I have 3 case study cities because I said it's not applicable everywhere. It's dependent. So we're looking to different climates and cities in different climates to see how these solutions respond when they are needed. So Rotterdam, Milan, and Madrid. So we're looking to humid, warm, temperate, humid, hot, summer, temperate, and the cold arid climate. The issue we are trying to address here is heat and health. And this, our focus is in Europe. And we know in Europe, the heat waves are the big killer. So it's the natural disaster that most kills people. And the increase in frequency and onset of heat waves, coupled with what we call the urban heat island effect in cities, it demands early adaptation measures. And when we talk about heat and health, we need to focus on 2 factors. So first of all, physiological factors, and the second one, the socioeconomic factors. And when we talk about the physiological ones, the most vulnerable groups are the elderly and children because of their physiology. And in the socioeconomic factors, we need to care about the low-income groups and athletes, outdoor workers, and people with chronic health conditions. So the opportunity we see here is to address the urban heat island, heat waves and extreme heat, but also extreme heavier storms and extreme precipitation. And now what we saw with the COVID crisis, inclusion belonging in recovery plans are at the table right now at several municipalities worldwide, but especially in Europe. And the crisis led to a decreased livability index. And here in Europe, we see an opportunity to build back better and greener. And when we talk about heat, climate risks in Europe, of course, there's heat, but also, especially in urban areas, heavy precipitation. So I started to assess opportunities in cities. So here's a case study in Milan that we wrote for a conference. So I study on stormwater collection in a square that just had an intervention with tactical urbanism. And we try to apply the solutions and see how they respond to both precipitation and extreme heat. And we know it is very effective for a hot summer day, but to addressing heat waves, we still have some challenges. And next, I was also working on hotspot mapping, the city scale. So this is a study in Rotterdam, assessing hotspots and related to urban morphology. And that I came up with a heat vulnerability mapping, showing the most vulnerable neighborhoods in the city. So my methodology, part 1 and 2 are completed at this stage. And I'm moving now to the neighborhood scale. So trying to assess now simulate neighborhoods and how using some parameters from the morphological parameters that came from the city, trying to assess urban materials and using also climatic data to come up with results in air temperature decrease and PT, physiological equivalent temperature, that we hope to get results as terms of urban heat island reduction and thermal comfort improvements. So our final considerations are that evaporative cooling is effective. We need to be careful with humidity, for example, Legionella. And this technology is not new, but it can enhance the multifunctionality of the public space if combined with other systems in a network, for example, vegetation and responsive systems. And urban spaces that adopt the systems, they need to be flexible and inclusive, as we saw. So they need to be accessible to children and the elderly, and they have to function as ways we can collect and store excessive rainwater and provide cooling. And thank you, and I welcome your questions.
Thank you very much for both of you. No. My colleague actually told me that there are 2 questions from the audience, so please. Yes, the microphone is still moving. Maybe I ask you a question first. You've been working on both in different cities now in Europe mainly. I was wondering if you saw any cultural differences for people's response to the cities, because of course cities are not planned based on the same rules, but they're planned also a little bit on the cultural heritage and our being accustomed to that, to the water.
Yeah, of course. I'm curious to know, for example, because the cities, people have a different relation with water. So, for example, the relation people have with water in the Netherlands is different from Italy. For example, in Italy, we see the strong culture of the fountains, and how we can work with that. And in the Netherlands, actually not so much the culture, but that is changing because we have climate change and extreme heat is coming. So people are now more aware of the effects of extreme heat. So this is something we are interested in, especially to see now in the 3rd phase of the project, using research by design and workshops and charrettes with practitioners.
Great. And that's, of course, taking into account that we are all enjoying the water, and it's being summer and not winter, and it's raining all the day. Vincent, perhaps let me know if you have questions from the audience, or otherwise we can also switch to Jeroen and ask if he has a question to us.
Yes, I can have a question. Thank you. It's interesting to see what you've been doing and in different municipalities, different areas. I'm not really wanted to correct it, but you said, okay, the cooling effect is very small, but the warming effect is large. And this was something I was just explaining that, to my opinion, our research for is also small, right? Even smaller, because the water body amount for small water surface water is not so large. So this is what I wanted to point out. But I really liked your presentation, and I see many similarities with what I've been doing. So I'd like to get in contact with you. And I'm interested in what you said about the combination of stormwater, solving a stormwater problem and heat stress. Can you elaborate a little bit more on this, because you said it very shortly?
Of course, yeah. So because we see we need to address both, because okay, evaporative cooling is effective, but we also have water scarcity, and we have droughts in the summer, so we cannot just afford using water for cooling. So I think it needs to be integrated with stormwater capture and cleaning and reuse. So these systems, it needs to go cyclic and together. And another question we have is like how we store this water, because, for example, from the study we did in Milan, we realized to meet Italian regulations, only storing the water in the public space is not enough. We needed to integrate with the private buildings that enclose the square. So I think it's also and we have a need. It's in the public space, it's happening in the public space, but we need to also integrate with the private owners of buildings. So that's my view.
Yes, that is clear. And also we're working on this. So we want to catch most of the rainfall. So in fact, we want to catch all the small rainfall events and infiltrate them in the ground. The extreme events, on the other hand, we can't catch because they are too big, and they are, in fact, a very extreme event only happens once in 20, 50, 100 years. So they are not interesting at all for solving a heat wave, because it won't be in the same moment. But all those small rainfall events, they are interesting because you can infiltrate in the ground and you can keep your, at least in the Netherlands, you can keep the greenery alive.
So I was curious from the project, because you mentioned the cooling niches, like people need to be close to a cooling center. And also I was wondering, okay, and then what solutions you have for the street, for the walk? How do you plan these networks in the city that connect the people and the cooling centers? Because you talk a lot about the stormwater on the street level. So something I wasn't thinking much about is the street level.
Yes, I'm very much thinking about street level. I think that's to improve the cities, because there are many residential streets and shopping streets in the city. So if you improve those, then little by little you improve the whole city. But so I think the solutions for water are like I presented, but for heat, you need those special cool, attractive cool spots, and you need on the pavement sufficient shadow. But it doesn't have to be all shadow, of course, because we, especially in the Netherlands, we like sun a lot, and we like to walk into the sun most of the year. Only a few days a year, I think it's far too hot, and so we should be careful not to design a shady city. And I think the designers can do very well if you just say, okay, these are rough guidelines. Please design a way that the most important pathways for pedestrians have sufficient options to go either in the shade or in the sun, or stop places in the shade.
I have actually one question also from the audience, from not the live audience, but our, let's say, online viewers. The question comes from Norris Ishak, and the question is the following: is there any nighttime UHI in your case study? Nighttime UHI in your case study? Okay.
For this study, I used the data that was already available, publicly available for the nighttime. But we know when addressing heat stress, the nighttime is the most important one that we should look. So yeah, so in thinking about cooling for the nighttime, I think these devices, they need to be tested. Maybe it's not like the focus of my research, but we have a colleague focusing on that scale, on those devices. I think we need we need innovative cooling devices to address the nighttime heat. Yeah.
Very much. With further ado, I think we will close the water-based session. We will shortly actually moving into the systems that do respond to people. And so let's take maybe a couple of minute break, and we will be back shortly.